And my name is Brian Thomas, and on behalf of CED, Royal Wholesale, and CES, I do want to thank everyone for attending. This is actually our 13th session of our monthly application webinar series. The topic that we are discussing this morning is justifying migration of legacy process systems to modern, open, and sustainable technology solutions, and we'll go ahead and dig into that. This presentation is delivered by Rovasys, which is one of our preferred integration partners throughout California, and the nation for that matter. So at this point, the Rovasys team will go ahead and introduce themselves, and we'll go ahead and get started.
All right, great. Thank you very much, Brian. Just to regurgitate what Brian said, this is a slide presentation on the justification of a legacy migration/modernization. Modernization is more the term used because we're not replacing just what's there. We're actually bringing new technology into the fold and hopefully helping your company find value in it. So, moving on, my name's Berger. I'm a professional engineer within the state of Ohio for control systems engineering. I've been with Rovasys company about 12 years. I've got extensive experience with not only greenfield projects but brownfield projects in dealing with modernization efforts. So I've been involved in both the justification phases throughout my business development career, planning, the engineering, and also the field cutovers. So I know the pains and the issues that come up with these type systems and projects. So I'll be giving a presentation along with Jim Riccardi.
Jim Riccardi, I collaborated with Dan on this. I'm also a PE in Ohio. I've been doing this for 24 plus years with Rovasys, Daily Controls, and Air Products. And I'm currently based in Ventura, California, and supporting all our project work in California. Any industry, but right now I've been doing a lot of life sciences and have a background with nutritional. And one interesting thing, we are currently doing a upgrade project in the Thousand Oaks area right now. So that's a PLC 5 to control logics upgrade. So very relevant to this topic.
Okay. And also in the room with us, everybody knows, is Matt Connaught, the director of our Life Sciences Division. Okay, so kind of the mission statement or business case for what the topic is today is all of our plants are asking engineering, operations, and all of the personnel to do more with less. You know, prices are right now, especially with the market downturn, are under a lot of pressure, and so either we compensate that through production increases at the same cost or lower raw material margins. So what we're going to be talking about today is how we're going to justify a migration in order to meet the business environment to show value to the business leaders within our organizations. So we're just going to hit a few of the justification topics here. These are some of the hot buttons that we see with a lot of different migrations and customers that we deal with. First and foremost, it's always a financial decision. Nobody does one just because they want to. There is dollars and cents tied to this, so we go through ROI calculations routinely. We're working with customers to identify shortcomings in their system and how that will affect them both production and cost-wise down the road, and we'll talk about that a little later on. Safety. Safety has become a big issue at the sites. Nobody wants to have any lost time due to injuries, so we're actually incorporating safety systems within our modernized systems so people can find more value and also source funding not just from the migration but from safety projects as well. You know, in modernizing these systems, we talked about it's not just a migration, it's a modernization. How are you going to realize production increases? Is that something that we can actually, a process we could lay a batch on top of, or possibly, you know, some software or interfaces to help you with your just-in-time manufacturing practices? So working on that as a justification. Maintenance efficiencies. Predictive maintenance is a big one. Asset management. How are your maintenance personnel interfacing with the system? Can they do things in a more predictive manner rather than a reactive? So that's definitely something that helps justify projects. And, you know, the Internet of Things is a huge buzz term in the industry right now. The industrial environment has been doing it for years. Ethernet has been available on the control-logic processors. The E&H instrumentation definitely has hard communication as well as some other protocols. So we've been pulling in data for years, but the business systems now want to see how it can be fed up to the ERP database, whether that be Microsoft Dynamics or SAP, and how they can make more intelligent business decisions based on that information. So those are just some of the big key button items that we're going to hit on, and also there's a myriad of other ones depending on your site and how things are running. So if somebody wants to talk later, we can discuss that. So one of the biggest roadblocks to a modernization effort is lobbying for the support. You've got to find the funds to make this done, or get this done, excuse me. Know that you're the visionary. You're the one that's bringing this to the table. You recognize the need for the new system and what value is going to be created out of it. So you need to be the Pied Piper and get everyone in line with your thought process and or curtail your thoughts to be beneficial for everyone. So you need to bring the approach to the table and or with a partner or a trusted Rockwell distributor. You need to go around the plant and let everyone know, and this is what I call kissing babies and shaking hands, how they're going to benefit from a modernization effort. So how will maintenance benefit from this? How will operations benefit? So you're just building that support throughout the plant, so you're not going to have any naysayers that are going to be working against you. And as I said, as you're going around, you need to ask those peers for their input because they want to feel as though they're stakeholders in this. So ask questions, modify your plans to include their valid needs and expectations. I say valid because there's always some outlandish ones, but we try to keep things on a very good level with everyone throughout the plan. Build your plan. The business unit is not going to fund an effort if you have no idea how it's going to get done. We'll discuss that in a little more detail, how we perform system audits and feed studies to enable you to bring that plan to your management so they have buy-in with it. And that falls into consulting a partner. Rogsys is a solution partner with Rockwell as well as many various control systems. We are independent, so if you want to start looking at an older legacy system and how you're going to benefit from a Rockwell versus an Emerson or a Siemens, we can help you do that critical analysis. And the last is nobody's going to actually fund anything without a cost estimate. So part of that feed or FEL study is going to be to help you give some base numbers to it so you can drive forward with your migration effort. So why migrate now? These systems are hard to maintain, mainly because a lot of the systems spares are becoming limited, things are going silver series or they're reaching end of life. There are some different avenues. A lot of people are reaching out to eBay and or remanufacturing websites that are buying components, remanufacturing them and selling them back on the market. But that's still limited. You buy things off eBay. We've had customers buy things that didn't work or worked for a very short time. So you can't always trust the eBay marketplace. One of the next big drivers is PC hardware. Thank you, Microsoft, but we still see old Windows NT boxes out there running systems today, which is a very scary thing for customers because a lot of them had the foresight to ferret away quite a few extra pieces and parts, but they're getting to the end of their stockpile. So we need to make sure that they have a plan for once that last PC dies and they're unable to support it, as well as the communications and diagnostics limitations. So yes, there are interfaces to older systems to expose data, but can those old serial connections maintain the high throughputs required when you're pulling large amounts of data? So typically that's a huge limitation factor with your legacy system. Another big factor, the baby boomers, the people that stayed in the marketplace because the stock market went down several years ago. They're now getting to the point where they don't want to work and they have sufficient funds that they can retire. So they're looking to get out of it. And a lot of the younger engineering force that wasn't brought up on these legacy systems isn't familiar or as comfortable working in that environment. So they've really been kind of spoiled in working with the new systems and not having to see the foundation where those systems came from. So it becomes a pain point. So one of the biggest migration reasons, was that those old systems were closed architectures. The whole Ethernet penetration into the industrial market, the Ethernet IP, marketplace, you're able to find a myriad of products and or services that will interface to Rockwell, Emerson, you name the system, they have an interface for it. We can get you all on a common protocol that is able to be managed not only by plant engineering, but also IT if you have their buy-in and they're knowledgeable enough on the system. And bringing out that data opens up the door for including new historians, advanced control, model predictive control, and MES solutions for your application. So how are we going to justify this financially to our internal business team? So those first two main bullet items, the increasing cost of those three sub-bullets and unplanned downtime, those are metrics that are easy to measure. Everybody has a dollar sign associated with 1 minute. 1 minute, 1 hour of downtime. So, and we can use the last 3 years downtime as a, just kind of a baseline to say, here's the downtime we've incurred that was unplanned, and how can we mitigate that with the new system? And as these legacy DCS systems age, and that knowledge base leaves the marketplace, you're gonna have more costs associated with finding a contractor that's able to support your systems moving forward. So there's going to be costs all around the board with that. The last four bullets are a little bit harder to put dollar signs on. So this is where you have to have critical conversations with your business units. How would they benefit? What value would they find in opening the operations to have more dashboards, more screens available, maybe some data analytics for the system so they can start doing troubleshooting and or intelligent business decisions in real time? And are you in or out of compliance with your industry? You know, have you done a hands-off with your system? Is there an issue with your insurance company where you need to come into compliance or some sort of governing body? So we need to make sure that that payback is there.
That was actually a big motivation for the current system that we're upgrading. The compliance issue. So they wanted, had a requirement, company requirement for domain authentication, which was not achievable with the old technology. It was actually made the payback dollars wasn't as important because the compliance issue overrode that.
Thank you, Jim. So this next slide deals more with the planning piece of it. You know, you alone are the visionary for how you want to bring the system in. If you're lucky, you have a few other people that share your vision, but what is your approach going to be? How are you going to put this in place and meet all the business expectations of your company? Is it going to be a full system rip and replace? Are you going to have the money for that, the downtime associated for that? Is it going to be phased by the system architecture? Is your HMI system failing and you just want to update your computers to a newer Windows platform with newer interfaces? Or is it phased by process area? Can you do a little bit of a piece of the plan at any given time on a small shutdown? And then part of that migration approach, that's more of the planning, but you need to start the selection process of, are you going to stick with the same vendor that's in there, or are you going to go out in the marketplace, solicit bids from several different control system vendors, and actually do an analysis of what their capabilities are and how it could be utilized in your plant? So these are all aspects that we help customers with on a daily basis. So a little bit on the project definition. This is where we're building the plan that we're going to end up taking to the business unit. The first thing is the hands-on system audit. I can't tell you how many times you know, customers have said, oh yeah, we have a panel out there and it's got 30 I/O points, and you get out there, it has either 100 or 20 of the points are no longer used, but nobody knew that. So this is where we start digging in not only to the wiring, the panels, but also in the graphics and into the code, the logic, and start seeing dead code, what's there, how complex is it. And so that's going to enable us to get a better feeling on any system interfaces that are shared between different areas of your plant. That will figure into the migration plan, because if we see that, process area A speaks to process area B via serial connection, we either need to make appropriations for that, in the process, or we need to just take both areas down at once and do the migration to just mitigate that risk. So once we start that system audit, we can start assigning hardware quantities to it and baseline estimates for what it's going to take engineering-wise. So this is where we start saying, this is our target, plus or minus 30%. Take this to your business unit and see if you have a tolerance for funding this all now, or if we need to start breaking it into pieces. The FEL, the front-end loading study, this is where we combine the actual audit and plan with a loading diagram of what's going to be handled internally within your organization and what you're going to look externally for, because everybody at the top thinks that their engineering can handle it. But once you start building a chart out of what your schedule is and just supporting the plant day-to-day operations and how you're going to support the cutover, it's going to come to light that you're not going to be able to do all the tasks that they think that you can. So once you have that the FEL complete and we're presenting a business case to upper management, you're going to get the thumbs up or thumbs down to get to the next phase of the project, which is the bid specs. So this is where we're going to take the information generated by the above bullets and generate an RFQ. You're going to send bid specs out to not only system vendors if you haven't selected a control platform, but also solution partners for integration services. So from that point, you have a good baseline estimate of about plus or minus 10%, and you're going to start looking to award the project once your business unit has fully funded it. And I'm leaving some of the granular details out of there. I know this process differs from company to company because there's some signatures are required, board meetings, but we'll just omit those smaller details right now. But and then we go to the PO issued to your engineering firm, the design, cut over the system, and the long-term support of your system. Because this is a new system, you want a partner that's going to be there to help you realize the value in the new control system and the bells and whistles that you didn't have before. Fortunately, ROAS this year, we are independent, so we see a myriad of different technologies, and we can help our customers see where they're going to gain efficiencies and help pinpoint technologies that they're going to benefit from. So, system audit. This is something I have a lot of hands-on experience with. We did a modernization effort at a soybean oil refinery up here in Ohio and some of their other sites, and I actually had to go out to the panels, ask the critical questions, and the drawings that they had we called the Dead Sea Scrolls because they literally were falling apart and nobody knew what they were. We found ourselves referencing drawings on the back of control cabinet doors, which I'm sure everybody has a few of those at their plant if they have an older facility. So, we did the audit on the panels. We went into the operations personnel, maintenance and engineering, and we held in-person interviews because I've been involved with a large number of migrations, and you could have the world's greatest migration and cutover in the world, but if operations haven't had their say in what the screens and how things are going to operate moving forward, they can be naysayers and say the system was a total flop, and upper management listens to that. So we like to get them involved at the beginning as well as maintenance to say, what do you guys need? What do you want to see? What do you hope to gain out of this new system? So definitely keep them involved in the process and also in the review process as design documentation is being generated. One of the last item is very important, understanding the goals and challenges. So what are you hoping to gain out of this system? If it is just a rip and replace, any control system vendor will be able to help you with that. But if you're hoping to realize value or increase your safety capability at the site for more compliance, we need to know that up front, and that's going to be all figured into your RFQ document because your partners need to understand what your final goals are, and it's not just, hey, let's go ahead and rip and replace. One of the big things that I've dealt with is people say we want up-to-date documentation. As I said, documentation has fallen by the wayside back when it was paper copies at a lot of sites, but now with all the electronic versioning, we can go ahead and update all your AutoCAD drawings, functional specifications, things of that nature, and you guys can hold on to that and keep those as living documents as the system changes over the years. So the migration plan. So in starting your migration plan, you need to start that high-level design and start that critical analysis of, how are we going to cut this over? What are the technologies? Yes, Ethernet's going to be incorporated. Can we start dividing this into logical pieces? Is it going to be a full rip and replace or a phased migration? So as part of that, those questions come up. Yes, it's a phased migration. What areas are your highest priority? Are you having failures in an area? Is your HMI the area you want to target first because you are on an old NT platform and it's a security concern for your corporate IT? And you need to identify who's going to drive this, not just at your site, but who's going to drive it on your partner site, as well as who is your sponsor within corporate management to say, you know, this is needed and supports your argument for funding beyond the plant level. And then how do you justify it? This is why we're going to do process area A before B, because we hope to alleviate the communications issues and build a stockpile of spares that we can use to limp us through so the other separate areas are migrated. So this is the FEL study that we talked about, the front-end loading. This is where all the information from the audit comes into play, and you start defining roles within your organization as well as your partner organizations. Not everybody is as visual as the controls engineer, so sometimes you have to build that system architecture and BOM. The system architecture is important because you start drawing a line down the page and saying, this is the area we're going to migrate first, and this is how we're going to do it. If anybody's like me, I'm a very visual person, and sometimes if I'm not as in tune with the plant, I want to make sure that I understand what's going on. We'll build out a rough project schedule at the FEL, and so there's going to be a lot of facets that go into this. Choose your approach very carefully based on all the above criteria. I know sometimes it's a give and take based on your plant's needs, but this is where we sit down with your engineering firm, yourselves, as well as all the stakeholders and business makers to say, you know, how are we going to do this? This often becomes a bargaining chip for downtime. Management will say you get 2 weeks of downtime, and then they come back and try and squeeze you down to 4 days, and this is where you throw the black and white schedule on the table and say, you know, we really need that full 2 weeks, or negotiate down to a slightly lesser amount if need be. A little bit of poker playing in all these projects. So we're going to really quickly breeze through two different compare and contrast of a full rip and replace versus a phase migration. And I know in the interest of time, I want to just breeze through these. We can tend back to them with questions. The big thing, the phase migration, the big takeaway here, the phase migration seems to be the better approach overall, but in terms of cost effectiveness, the overhead associated with meetings, documentation, dissimilar system interfaces is typically more cost effective from the control implementation side to do a full rip and replace, but a lot of times the business does not allow that because of time and/or production needs, so a phase migration is favored. So we did a full rip and replace here at a glass plant where we virtualized to a PlantPAx system. We went in, and fortunate enough, they had their furnace go down for a rebuild, I believe, and enabled us plenty of time to go in and rip and replace this system. So we're just going to drive some metrics here. The phase migration was a paper machine in which they couldn't afford the downtime. Their production and or client requirements did not allow that. So we did process area by process area and phased in the HMI as we moved forward as the process areas changed. So just kind of a compare and contrast here. Main takeaways here, the I/O counts are a little skewed, so it's a little bit apples to oranges here, but we want to give you guys a little bit of a flavor. Let's see here.
A lot more graphics associated with your paper mill and a lot more discrete areas within the paper mill.
Yeah, a lot more discrete. The glass is a much more process-oriented area. But here's the key metrics there in red. It took about 12 months to do the glass plant, a little over 2 years to do the paper mill. Costs went up as far as the phased approach, but there's more meetings, more cutover time involved, more support time, and the percentage of changes. So as you go through this, if you don't do a full rip and replace, you need support time and people on site extended periods to gain that acceptance of the system and making sure those interfaces are working adequately between the two systems if need be. So in summary, you need a plan. The plan's the big piece because that's what's going to build the support within your organization. Building that case for the return on the investment, the payback. As engineers, we're not always well versed in how to understand the net present value calculations and how the bean counters are dealing with money, but we need to really sit down with them, understand their thought process and what they're using as metrics to justify these projects. So let's show them payback as well as value, and if there's any value we can show by exposing data up to the ERP system and or faceplates to management, because the more support we have in upper level management, the more likely we're going to get projects funded and have them a success. Understand the main company driving, the main decisions driving your company. just to that point, you know, understand what your management wants to see, understand what the plant wants to see, and find that hybrid between the two. A lot of times we're acting as an intermediary by helping engineering justify those projects. And the big thing is partnering with someone who has seen it all, because if you don't have faith in your partner, you're not going to be able to sit down and everyone feel a warm, fuzzy feeling once cut over. They think there's always a risk, but, you know, people like Jim and myself and Matt, we've been through this a handful of times, so really, I'm not going to say I'm not surprised by something, but, you know, we take these things in strides and we have contingencies, and we're able to leverage other projects and what we've done on them. So, you know, I'd like to open things up to questions if anybody had any questions, or Brian.
Yeah, we're going to go ahead and open up. And actually, yeah, could you just, perfect. Could you just take a minute to just kind of discuss Rovisys and the company just as a whole real quick, and then we'll dive into the questions.
Okay, so Rovisys opened in 1989. It was founded by Old Bailey Controls executives. So we've probably got about 20 to 30 people that came from Bailey Controls. We are approximately 600 people now. We are a global organization. So we have offices all over the United States, as well as in Singapore and a new shingle in the Netherlands with one of our sister companies. So we're over 600 people now. We are a Rockwell Automation solution partner, deploying PlantPAx solutions, as well as I said, we're independent, so we're associated with Emerson, Rockwell, Siemens, you name the control OEM, and we can do their product, as well as software products. So we're well versed in the MES layers as well as the control. So when you're looking for value in a partner, you know, in exposing that data, bringing more value to the table, it's going to be in that MES and exposure to your ERP as well as dashboards. So that's definitely one of the big things. We have so much experience in these migrations at Rockwell, as well as several other control companies have contracted us to do their conversion tools, as well as cabling conversion solutions to these old systems. So.
And I'll just add one point about the kind of the profile of our organization, because we do have that controls experience. When you look at that S95 model, we can do everything from, you know, all the way from your instrumentation all the way up to the MES and interface into the ERP system. So it's you know, it's good to have that one-stop shop, so you don't have to you don't have to work with multiple vendors for the different disciplines. So it's, you know, with the way that information is tied through the whole systems today, it definitely offers a benefit in that regard.
Excellent. So at this point, we're going to go ahead and open up for questions. So I don't have, from an initial standpoint, I actually have one that I wanted to bring up. So, and you kind of mentioned this in the beginning and the end as well, but you noted that in regards to the necessity of building a plan, I think I've seen a lot of organizations that tend to struggle with how do you start. Now, I know you mentioned the audit, but can you just speak to some of the best practices that you've seen, how organizations can start building out that roadmap?
All right, Brian. So the roadmap has to start within the company, your team prioritizing what the needs are in your plant. So you know, this could be based on risk, on perceived downtime, but it comes down to starting with a prioritization of inside your plant. If that old communication bus drops out every other week, that obviously needs to be addressed. If controllers are failing, you know, those need to be addressed. So the starting point is to identify the high priority items and get those moving. I think, you know, most business cases can see that and don't have as many issues going forward with that replacement with that type of situation.
Okay.
That's the starting point. Identify the immediate needs, and I think a lot of places that have controls in there from the 90s can recognize those needs. Dan mentioned one just in the presentation about your documentation. So, we find a lot of places as we do these evaluations that there doesn't appear to be any documentation, or if there was, it's lost, or it hasn't been maintained. So these are all kind of like low-hanging fruit reasons that you have to update.
Okay, yeah, no, I appreciate that. So then one other question, and then we'll probably close out here if we don't have any others. So we kind of have discussed when you're doing that migration, the phased versus the rip and replace. Can you briefly speak to some on-site cutover options that are available where systems can be tested in parallel, essentially live on-site?
Yeah, so we've done systems where customers have run their system for 40 years and they don't necessarily have the warm and fuzzy throughout their organization. So we've actually emulated the system in parallel with the new system using a serial interface or an OPC interface, so they can actually prove that the control loops are acting in the same manner or the HMI is acting the same way it should. And that's what ultimately happens. Operations is typically the bottleneck there, is they have this fear of the unknown of the new system. So what we'll do is we'll put the new HMI console right next to the old one and tell them, slowly start doing some of your smaller tasks on the new system, test it out, see its robustness, how you can gain more speed and it's easier to use. And, we slowly start seeing them moving away from the old consoles and coming to the new HMIs so they can say, hey, this is really a good system. And what that does is it also acts as an SAT for the customer. If they find little bits and pieces that they need modified or they would rather see a tank on the left side of the screen or the right, that can be identified now because it's much easier to do it in these newer systems than it was in the old systems.
Yeah, that was very beneficial for operations to buy in. Once they see a reluctant operations group, that really helps. So,
yeah, we've done this application at a few steel mills where production downtime is a bad thing on a blast furnace. Power plants where people have a lot of faith in the old systems and they have a little fear of the new ones. But definitely, this is where we win operations over.
Excellent. Any other questions?
I mean, do any of the callers have any, oddball applications or need a little bit of, direction on how they start their process? Well, let me pose that question to them. And we can also deal with that offline. After this, we're going to put our contact information up. So if you want to reach out to Jim or myself, that's definitely something we can do.
Yeah, so if you would go ahead and put up your contact information there. So I think at this point, I do want to thank the RoboSys team for presenting and that for everyone that did attend. To that point, if you do want to have some additional discussions on this or related topics, feel free to reach out to the RoboSys team or reach out to your CED, Royal Wholesale, or CES sales reps, and we can certainly discuss further. If there's no additional questions, we will go ahead and close out this session.